Good morning. This is the Friday Fireside, and I'm here with Tim Duffy, who introduced himself to me after I did my Fireside with Evan Shapiro not long ago. And Tim is the guy who helped Evan get through an insane amount of stress. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Rick. Thank you so much for having me on the program. Appreciate it.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Topanga Canyon, California, which is apparently where most meditation teachers should live,
All
in the
right.
hills.
And meditation teacher is apparently one of the things that you do, but so our audience knows, you're also, from my side of the insane world, with a lot of time at Spike TV and Game Show Network, and where else did I say? Dick Clark Productions. My God, were you working on the New Year's Eve stuff with Dick Clark Productions?
No, I'm from Philadelphia, and when I first moved out to Los Angeles in the late '90s, uh, you know, if you had told me that I would have even crossed paths with Dick Clark, I would have
Right.
said you're crazy. But somehow I got a job as a production assistant at Dick Clark Productions and worked my way up there. And one of the highlights of my career was working on the Golden Globes as his assistant
Whoa. Whoa.
when uh,
Whoa.
when Man on the Moon won. And we were at the we were in rehearsals, and I remember sitting next to him. And like 6 months earlier, I was literally like sitting in Philadelphia, going, "What the hell am I going to do with my life?"
Right. Right.
And I'm sitting there next to Dick Clark, and he's got a phone hardwired because it was the '90s, and in front of him, in front of the stage, and a parade of like the world's biggest celebrities coming up to kiss the ring of Dick Clark, and I'm sitting there just watching this all go down. What has happened in my life? It was crazy. That was 25 years ago.
There you go. There you go. Well, about 50 years ago, my wife was growing up. Both of us were growing up in suburban Philadelphia, watching American Bandstand. So you see, there are connections everywhere.
There
All
you
right.
go.
So speaking of connections, how did you meet Evan Shapiro, and what did you do to help him, and what can you do for us? Boy, there's a mouthful, isn't there?
Well, I met Evan Shapiro years back during my former career as a TV producer and executive. We kind of advanced through the entertainment world in parallel paths, right? He was a network executive, among other things. I was a network executive. Um, and I had heard about this guy who was pretty outspoken and aggressive and powerful and type A and smart and pretty much smarter than a lot of the other folks in the industry. And so our paths crossed, but we never really worked together until about 2 years ago when he came on board as an advisor for a startup that I had founded with my twin brother called Yum Crunch. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Evan Shapiro. He's kind of brilliant. He's now the media cartographer,
Yep.
the soothsayer for the future of the industry as it, deconstructs itself and tries to reform. Um, and it is a very unique set of circumstances that put me in direct contact with him with regard to his illness. So um, Evan and I are working together, him as a consultant, me starting this other business. Simultaneous to that, I had a production company. We were nominated for 4 Emmys for a show we had on Netflix a couple of years back. And in the background of my life, my old friend's anxiety and depression brought me to meditation about 30 years ago. I started teaching meditation throughout the entertainment industry as this like secret. I was like a secret kind of like resource to executives and employees and assistants throughout the entertainment industry. I'd get the call when someone got a diagnosis or was having to fire a bunch of people or whatever. Hey, can you help me out with my stress reduction and my happiness? Sure, while I'm running these other businesses and doing this other job. So, cut to a couple of years back, we're in the throes of award season, nominated for these awards, and we're also in the middle of a pandemic. And I couldn't think about anything else other than helping people manage their stress
Right.
and managing anxiety. People were suffering all over the world. And I'm going, hey, isn't it cool that I got these awards in this show? And It was at that time that I decided that I needed to commit myself completely to supporting other human beings. And Evan Shapiro comes into the equation. We start working together in different ways. And then he gets this cancer diagnosis, stage 4 lymphoma, super treatable. But here's this, super powerful being who all of a sudden is put into this state of needing extra support as he goes through the treatment. And I just happen to have had the experience of working with a lot of folks who've been going through cancer treatment, who had been going through cancer treatment and other things. So I said, hey, man, if you need some help, I'd love to support you. And he said, yes. And that's when we started a weekly mindfulness and meditation training that in essence, he took on passionately, right? He had never really been a regular meditator, but he took on these practices in deep, passionate ways. And ultimately, as he faced some of the most difficult stuff that a human being can face in their lives, which is their own death.
Yep.
He was able to deploy these tools and techniques that we had been working on, that he had deftly incorporated into his own regular practice on a daily basis, so that he could alleviate his own suffering, so that he could kind of relate to that top layer of unnecessary suffering that we often bring into the equation, and then directly relate to the layer of, okay, here's what's going on. Here's my clear-minded, adult-oriented approach to what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind. And if I can relate to that directly without adding on the junk on top, then maybe I can navigate through this in a healthier way. And that's exactly what he did and what he continues to do.
What do you consider to be the junk on top? That's an
So
interesting phrase.
the junk on top, in the mindfulness communities, we talk about the parable of the two arrows. So when we're born into this human body, we're immediately in a state of decay. So we are born to die. But if we're in a constant state of worrying about death and worrying about sickness and worrying about our own demise, then we're not actually truly alive. And so the junk on top is called the second arrow. The first arrow is you're born into a body that will get sick and will die. The second arrow is the worry on top of that, the constant perseveration, the obsession with, oh my God, how do I avoid that inevitability? So when we bring our energy into the presence of what's actually occurring when we are diagnosed with an illness, whether that illness is, COVID, with which we've all encountered a lot, through which we've all encountered a lot of our own insecurities, or that's cancer, or that's, a bum knee, right? As a 50-year-old who goes out on the soccer field and probably should have hung up the cleats a few years back. That layer of kind of obsession in thinking about how bad all this stuff is, that layer of shoulda, woulda, coulda, I shouldn't be dealing with this. This is too much for me. I can't handle this. That layer on top is the junk that we call the second arrow. And that second arrow is optional. The first arrow is not. The first arrow of being born into a body that will get sick and age and die is not optional. That's the deal, right?
That's life.
That's life, right? And the joke is that, what did the Buddhist doctor write on the death certificate as the cause of death? Birth, yeah. Right? So when we relate in a healthy way to the reality of these facts, this fact pattern that is not, no one on earth has ever eluded this fact pattern, sickness, aging, death. We relate to that in a healthy way. In fact, we actually can develop a much more alive way of being with ourselves and with our family members, with our careers, with our businesses, with our children, our grandchildren, our friends. This is kind of a magical tool that is 2,600 years old, that over the past 50, 20 years in America, a lot of folks have begun to recognize as a tool that can help enliven their lives and, bring a quality of joy and presence that previously seemed inaccessible, as we all obsessed over that junk on top, right?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about eliminating the junk on top in order to experience the joy, essentially. But yet, in my experience, you have to seek the joy. It is your responsibility to yourself to seek the joy. So one is eliminating stuff that's in the way. The other is kind of almost pushing through it or ignoring it. Ignoring it, I guess, is the same as getting it off the top. But my approach is a little bit more active. Your approach is a little bit more passive, right?
It's, look, it's an interesting perspective. It's the question of effort, right? Yeah. From the perspective of mindfulness and meditation, at least the meditation that I teach, we are always and already free. The layers that we add on top are complications. So the joy is always and already present. All we have to do is recognize the presence of that joy. And that's less about effort and more. In fact, it's less effort than it is. It's less effort. Let's leave it at that for a second, right? What does that mean, less effort, right? When we become aware of what's occurring in the present moment, and we take that kind of backward step into awareness itself, the wide open spaciousness of awareness itself, we begin to recognize, and we can start to deconstruct the layers that are taking place in the present moment. The perseveration on thoughts, the obsession with trying to obtain something in the future, or the obsession with regretting the past.
Yeah.
We start to recognize the presence of, well, there is just this. And when I bring the past into the present, it's not actually the past. It's actually just perseveration, obsession with what has already occurred, which is no longer here. When I pull the future in a grasping sort of way into the present moment is now just filled up with the activity of thinking, of wanting, of desiring, right? So through mindful awareness, we come back into the body, we come back into the mind. There are just 6 ways of experiencing this life, just 6 ways of being human. There's the 5 senses: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, right? And then, is that 5? Did I do 5?
I think you did.
Seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, touching. Yes, smelling. So you've got eyes, you've got ears, you've got a body, you've got a mouth, right? You've got these senses that you're born into. And in some sense, that's like the cockpit of the plane that you're flying throughout this life.
Okay.
And then you've got thinking. So those are the 6 ways that we have available to us to be alive. Okay. Those 6 ways of experiencing this life are all within the realm of awareness itself. Awareness is non-judgmental. It's present. It says yes to absolutely everything that arrives through the 5 senses and the mind. And we can use any one of these 6 ways of knowing what it is to be human, to be us, as like a lightning rod, right? So when you're super stressed and everything feels chaotic, you can go, all right, which of these 6 ways am I going to utilize as a lightning rod to ground me into presence, into awareness itself? So if we were to do that right now, Rick, we could do it just through hearing. So if we simplify through the sense door of the ears, we can just simply notice the soundscape of our lives in this present moment.
Okay.
There's just hearing. Uncomplicated, direct. Notice the nervous system begins to quiet itself. Notice the mind starts to quiet itself somewhat as we allow the sound of the world to enter our ears and pass right through like clouds in the sky. Simplify, simplify, simplify. This is the power of presence. This is the power of awareness, right? It's actually doing less than what our normal activity is. In the seeking joy, we're actually using our minds to find something that seemingly is not here. But when we regroup around one of the five senses or the mind itself, it's only in the presence of these six ways of knowing the world where joy can actually be found. So I hope that's helpful and
That is.
articulates the perspective.
Okay, so if our audience, obviously, we'll make sure they know how to contact you. But what you just did was take us through a very soft but very effective exercise in what it means to almost, it's not self-aware, it is a focused awareness on one thing. You use the example of hearing, and take everything else out, and what that does to you mentally and physically, and calm and lower my blood pressure. God knows I could use that. Wow, that's all right. So for those of us who know Evan, anybody who can calm him down is somewhat of a miracle worker. And it sounds like you were successful not at calming him down, but showing him how to calm himself, didn't you?
Yeah, that's it, right? It's not really, it's certainly not about me.
Yeah.
It's about him.
And
And
you giving the tools and describing them effectively so you can, I mean, somebody can go, oh shit, I get that.
yeah, these tools, you don't have to become a daily meditator who sits for an hour a day, ringing bells and lighting incense. Really, these tools are deployable and useful at will in any circumstance. They are always available.
Okay.
And
I'm
so,
going to ask one thing, and we got to close up, but all right. If you were to give somebody advice on what to do every morning when they sit at their desk, turn on their computer, and right before they start reading 8,700 emails, is there something that you can help all of us do to lessen the anxiety about what's in the 8,600 email that I haven't gotten to yet? Is there something that you can do to help us all be more effective at what we have to do that day?
absolutely. Yeah. The first thing I would do is check in. There's two things I would do. One, check in with my attitude before I turn on the computer.
Yep.
Ask the question, what is it like to be me right now? And we just simply plant that question for 10, 15 seconds
Yep.
into the equation. If we're agitated, we are obstructed, we are constricted. If we are relaxed and open, then we are more likely to encounter the onslaught of material that's going to come into our sense organs from a place of openness and less constriction. It's very, very simple. So, what is my attitude? What is it like to be me right now? Right. Uh, if I am open and ready, then perhaps I just gently ease my way in and I check in with my attitude throughout the day. When I'm feeling contracted and constricted, I can then just simply ask myself the question, can I feel my feet on the ground? Can I feel my body being supported by the chair?
Okay.
And as I draw my awareness into the physical sensations of the body in the present moment, everything starts to open up, everything starts to calm down, and we can kind of engage with what is to follow without that heavy layer of junk on top, that second arrow of worry and fear and anxiety. I'm simplifying it. I'm simplifying it, but that's my advice.
Interesting that you use that hand language. What I do in a moment like that is I have a tendency to say, push back, hold, push everything else away. I may not be going through the exercises, but the result is about the same, is too much, push, hold, and then come back in. Interesting.
I think what you're describing is beautiful, Rick. It's awareness. It's noticing first and foremost what's going on.
Yeah, that stuff was getting right.
Yeah. That recognition provides a gap for our response patterns that follow. So I would say that your practice is a beautiful practice. Just the recognition itself that I am in a state of contraction or constriction, or too muchness, provides us with the gap that we need to mindfully approach what's to follow.
Now, if I could simply teach that to my 5-year-old and 7-year-old grandchildren, life would be perfect. How do I get them to? Never mind. Anyway.
By the way, if we could approach life the way children approach life, which is dropping the drama, we get dramatic as little ones. But what little kids are great at is not holding on to stuff.
Oh, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. All right, listen, we're going to go. Thank you very much for your time. Tim Duffy, I'm going to provide a link to make sure people can find you. And thank you, bud. I really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you, man. Have a great one. Thanks for this.
All right.
Bye, Rick.
All right. And that was it.
Cool.
Just that easy.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, it was. It was. And I think that you have you've given people some tools that they can use. And you know, and in my world, if I can get people nodding, then I know I'm getting through, right?
Yeah.
In your world, maybe you want people to get to that oh shit moment where they go, oh shit, really?
You know, it's like
I can do that.
I like the notion of just planting seeds, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why I'm not like a hardcore, like you need to meditate every day. If someone takes away just one little bit of usefulness that they can then deploy as they pause, right? That beautiful teaching that you gave at the end of just recognizing that things aren't feeling great.
Yeah.
And you referenced pushing it away, right?
Right.
That's mindfulness of what's happening. And that quality of gap that occurs in that space is where the choice lives. You know, and so many of us are not living in the land of choice. We're living in the land of choicelessness.
Yeah.
We're activated, we respond, we cause harm to ourselves and others. Our job is to step back and have an adult relationship with the gap.
Cool, man. All right. Well, thank you, bud. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, my brother. Have a good one, man.
I'll let you know when it runs. Okay. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye, Rick.